All right, gang, good morning. Good morning. Let's get started. So I've got a great message for you this morning. Not necessarily a ton of time. We're going to get it done here and get out of here by about 35 after the hour. So we got to get to it. But I want to share with you one of my favorite stories. Not a personal story, but I think it's a story that we can all relate to, because it is about self-belief, self-talk, and also about the influences of others and how it is that we can allow people, including ourselves, to affect our well-being and ultimately our success and really what our fate will be. I don't believe in fate as in predetermined. I believe that it is something that we can determine based upon a very key component that we can control, and that component, of course, is what we think about. The story is this. Of course, we know, generally speaking, the story of Thomas Edison. We know that he invented the light bulb. I looked it up this morning to see some of the other things that he invented. It reminded me that he invented the phonograph, which is basically the voice recorder or sound recorder. He also invented an innovation with the telegraph. The telegraph used to be an instrument that would send signals, and you could only send one signal at a time. And Edison actually invented what was called the quadruplex, where you could send 4 signals at a time. So it increased the efficiency of that machine, that communication device, by 4-fold. He was a man, of course, who invented the light bulb, and he invented or helped invent motion pictures, and the list goes on and on. In fact, he has over whether international or national patents, he has over 5,000, as I understand, of things that he invented that were worth being patented. A brilliant man, amazing. And yet, my favorite story about him is not any of those inventions, although it certainly makes it worthwhile and notable. But my favorite story about him is this. When Edison was a small child and in grammar school, he was instructed one day by his teacher to bring home a letter. And Edison was not a good student. Part of his challenge was that he was deaf in one ear and that he was hard of hearing in the other. So he had a very hard time communicating. And in fact, he was quoted as saying that he was okay with it because what it meant is that conversations were very short because he couldn't understand people. And it gave him the opportunity to work more. And so he would literally work 16-hour days consistently. That was normal for him. Where the average person works 8, he worked 16, because he didn't spend a lot of time talking to people because it didn't go well, because he couldn't hear what they had to say. And apparently he was not good at reading lips. So this young man who was very challenged, or this kid who was challenged at school and was not a good student, was instructed to bring this letter home to his mother, which he dutifully did. He brought this letter home to his mom, did not open it. Well, she opened it and she read the letter. And after she read the letter, she read it aloud to Thomas. And it read something to the effect of, look, your child is a genius. This is what she read to him. This school is too small for him, and it doesn't have enough teachers of the caliber that he needs to train him. So please teach him yourself. That was what she wrote, or rather read to Thomas. Well, years later, after his mother died, and he had experienced a great deal of success and was already well on his way to being in the history books, he came across the letter. His mother had saved it, and she had intentionally saved it. And he opened it up, at first not recognizing what it was, but then as he opened it and saw who it was from and who it was addressed to, he realized it was that letter. And he read it. And this time, what he read was different than what he had heard as a child. And this is what was written on that letter. Your son is addled, meaning he was mentally ill, and we will not allow him to attend this school anymore. Please find alternative means to educate him. In other words, they were disinviting him to school because they were having a hard time teaching Thomas for whatever reason, including probably the fact that he was deaf. So interesting that his mother chose not to share with him that letter. Well, obviously, if you're a parent or a grandparent, I think you would choose to do the same thing. You certainly wouldn't share with a small child that sort of message. It's, even though it may have been true that they were not equipped to handle him and they couldn't educate him, it was certainly not a message that a kid in elementary school should have heard or should have been reinforced in their mind. The reason I share that story with you, because it speaks to the point of the importance of the messages that we hear and the conversations that we have with others. But I also would say with the conversation that we have with ourselves. So here's a question that I have for you. When you woke up this morning, how did you feel? Did you feel confident? On a scale from 1 to 10, I'm just curious how you felt. Now, for a lot of you, you're going to say, I felt confident. I felt very powerful. I felt optimistic. I was ready to start today. I'm assuming, though, if you're honest with yourself, for a lot of you, you probably didn't feel that way. And here's what's interesting. I would tell you that that's normal. Either one can be normal, but it's certainly normal that maybe you woke up this morning and you didn't feel confident, that you didn't feel 100%. Here's what is interesting. What we know through research, through academic research, is that and scientific research, is that the average person will have around 60,000 thoughts every single day. 60,000 thoughts. Now, we hear large numbers all the time, and so 60,000 doesn't seem like a very large number. When we're talking about a national debt of 25 trillion, we're talking about all the time of making hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year in real estate. We're talking about 320 million people in the United States, or 7.4 billion. 60,000 doesn't seem a lot, but when you just stop for a second, think about, well, wait a minute, that's 60,000 thoughts. That's 60,000 individual things that my brain focuses on every single day. Guys and gals, that is a lot of thinking. And here's what's scary about that, is the vast majority of those thoughts are negative. They're negative. So here's the question that I have for you. On a scale from 1 to 10, how did you feel this morning? I want you to just take a second now, and I want you to just write that down. Be honest with yourself. How did you feel? And if the honest answer is, it was a 10, then great. That's fantastic. Doesn't mean you should stop listening, though. We're going to have a very important conversation. But if it's less than that, then be honest. You know, if it was a 4 or 5 or a 6 or a 7 or 8, whatever it is, if it was a 1, be honest with yourself. On a scale from 1 to 10, how did you feel? Were you confident? Did you lack confidence? Were you excited about getting up this morning, or not so excited? Did you hit the snooze button 3 or 4 times? You know, what was going through your brain? In some of those already, you know, those 60,000 thoughts you're going to have today, were those thoughts positive or negative? How many of those were positive? How many of those were negative? See, when you're having 60,000 thoughts, you're not conscious of that. It's impossible. You're not going to be conscious of 60,000 thoughts. Doesn't mean that it's not happening, though. See, it's happening, but just on a subconscious level. So I'm asking you to stop for a second to recognize what's happening on a subconscious level. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how did you feel? So as you answer that question, here's a question for you. Who is the #1 influencer of your mental health? Is it your spouse? You think about the challenges that we all have with our significant other or our partner or boyfriend, girlfriend. And we put so much emphasis and importance on our relationship with them and the things that they say and do and how that impacts our mental well-being. Is it that person? Is it your parents? You know, and however they parented you, how they currently still try to parent you if your parents are still alive. You know, I think parents never stop trying to do that. Is it your clients? How about, you know, if you have kids, is it your children? You know, those of you who are moms, and if especially your kids are still not back in school because of COVID, you know, you might say, yes, it is my kids. My kids are my #1 influencer of my mental well-being, and they need to go back to school. You know, and I'm not here to say that any of these people, whether it's your spouse or your children or your clients or your parents or anybody else who influences your life on a daily basis, that they don't affect your mental well-being. But here's the thing that I want you to recognize, that we all have to recognize and ultimately take responsibility. Would you like to take responsibility? The answer, of course, is, I hope, is yes. You want to take responsibility for your well-being and for your future. I believe that the number one influencer of our mental well-being is ourselves. It's ourselves. It's the number one conversation that we can have on a daily basis is the conversation that we have with ourselves. So when you wrote down on a scale from 1 to 10 how you felt this morning, and it wasn't the number that you want, here's the thing that I want you to recognize. The number one influencer of that answer, whatever it was, whether it was a 10 or a 1 or anywhere in between, it is you. You're the number one influencer. And I have to tell you guys and gals, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, that's great news. How about for you? Is that great news? See, I think it's great news for a couple of reasons. Number one, because ultimately it means that I'm responsible. And if I'm responsible, I can change it. I can change it. But the other reason I say it's good news for me is because I recognize that in every single day, at every moment possible, and I'm not perfect at it, I really work to make certain what it is that I'm thinking about. So critical. So my question for you is, are you doing that? I want to take you through an exercise. Let's start with this. Let's slow down for just 1 second. I want you to get in a very reflective state of mind. And when I say reflective, meaning just slow down for a second. Stop judging things, the things around you, the Zoomcast, the clarity of the picture, or even the words that I'm using, or the messages. Just stop for a second. Stop judging. Try to just get clear. And I want to ask you this question. What are the top, well, even if just the one, but I'd like you to consider over the next 60 seconds or so, what are the top 3 negative things that you say to yourself? Whether it's out loud or in most cases, mixed in with those 60,000 thoughts that you have on a daily basis. What are those negative thoughts that you're having? Things like, I'm stupid, I can't do it, life isn't fair to me, it's too late for me, I'm too old, I've been doing this too long, I don't have enough time left, I should have started when I was younger, no one will ever love me, I'm not lovable, I'm not good at ... fill in the blank, I'll never be good at it. I just want you to just stop for a second and be honest with yourself. So I think one of the most difficult things to do is to admit that oftentimes we're not kind to ourselves. It's tough, because it's tough enough to imagine or to be in relationships, whether they're intimate or otherwise, where people aren't kind to us, where they don't say kind things to us. You know, clients or prospects who say some of the meanest, nastiest things without regard to how it would impact us on an emotional level. Strangers, right? But what are we saying to ourselves? What are you saying to yourself? Just take the time for just another 30 seconds to write down at least one. I want you to write down at least one, if not 2 or 3. And here's what I know about every one of you. Even if you're really good at maintaining a positive mindset, I know because you're human, you have a lot of negative thoughts. Doesn't mean you're not good at combating them, but you have a lot of negative thoughts. And there are a lot of recurring negative thoughts. So I want to ask you to be honest with yourself and identify those. Because they say that the first step to recovery is admission. Guys and gals, I just want you to admit that that's going on. So let's give it about 15 more seconds. Just think about it. Yeah, Judy says a lot. There are a lot. Well, Judy, I have to say to you, congratulations that you recognize that you're willing to admit that. Because a lot of people don't recognize it, first of all, and then a lot of people don't want to admit it. Because if you admit that somehow, again, it goes back to a negative thought, we think we're not as good as other people, that there's something wrong with us, that it makes us very abnormal. Well, no, it makes you very normal in the sense that you're average, that's what average people do. But I want you to be abnormal. I want you to be abnormal in that you're willing to have this conversation with yourself so that you can stop doing this on a conscious level, because that's the only place where it's going to start is on a conscious level. So now, assuming that you have written down at least one, if not two or three negative things, the next thing that I want you to think about is just, again, slow down, be in the moment, and think about this thing that you've written down. I want you to imagine, just close your eyes for a second. Seriously, close your eyes, stop looking at me, stop looking around in the room, and just close your eyes for a second. Now, I want you to imagine, focus on that one negative thought, the most negative one that you wrote down. I want you to just focus on that for a second. I want you to, in this moment, say, okay, I believe that. That's what I believe. That I believe. I honestly and genuinely believe that thing, that I'm stupid, or that it's too late for me, or that no one will ever love me. I'm not good enough. It never works out for me. Whatever that thing is, I want you to just see it in your mind and just keep repeating it, okay? That it's the truth. That is true. Now, knowing that in this exercise, believing that that is true, I want you to imagine your life going over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You're at the end of your days. There you are, 85, 90, 95, 100-year-old man, woman. What does your life look like? What did it look like? Believing that thing. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you rich or are you poor? Are you married or are you single? Are you healthy or are you sick? What does your life look like? Be honest with yourself. What does it look like believing that? And all the other negative things that we say to ourselves that we tend to believe that affect the way we wake up every single morning, not necessarily feeling confident and excited about the day, this opportunity, this gift called life. Guys and gals, I want you to first of all recognize the thoughts that you're having, especially those private thoughts that you don't share with other people, the things that you say about yourself that a stranger would never dare say to you, that your best friend or your parent or your child would never say to you, because they see who you truly are. The good, kind, genuine, the potential. What Thomas Edison's mother saw in him. See, the thing that I want for you is to be what Thomas Edison's mother was for him. I think we all need that. As much as we can and should rely on other people to help us feel good about ourselves, to believe in us, to encourage us, the most critical person is ourselves. I want you to be that person who believes in themselves. Because as much as other people can believe in us, and we all do, you do, you have people who believe in you, I believe in you. I know that George believes in you. I know that your manager believes in you. I know you have people in your life who believe in you. But if you aren't counted among that crowd consistently, honestly, man, life is going to be very challenging. And you won't be happy, you'll be sad. And you won't be rich, you'll be poor. Now, I'm not just talking monetarily, I'm talking otherwise. You know, you'll struggle to be in relationships because, man, it's hard to love someone who doesn't love themselves. And I'm not talking about narcissism, I'm just talking about loving yourself, recognizing that you're a good person, right? See, it's about message control. The number one conversation, guys and gals, that you can have in real estate, well, this is going to shock you, is not with your clients, it's with yourself. The second most important conversation is going to be with your prospects and your clients. Because the conversation you have with yourself will impact the conversations and the quality of those conversations with the people whose lives you need to influence in this business. So as you've taken the time to write down that negative thing or things that you say about yourself, I want you to take the next step. I want you to think about really what the truth is. Because if you were to share with me what that negative thing is, 9 times out of 10, I can tell you it's not true. And I can prove it to you. But when we say something to ourselves over and over and over and over again, and we do it subconsciously, and once in a while it bubbles up consciously, it's difficult for us to believe that it's not true. But here's what I know. If a stranger walked up to you and said any of those negative things or a thing at the level of caliber of those things that you wrote down, you would become angry, pissed off. You would either start to confront them and start to, spew negative energy towards them, or you would do what any rational, normal person would do, would be to get out of this situation, to end the conversation, because you don't want to be around it. You'd end the relationship if it were a relationship. You wouldn't put up with it. And yet we put up with it. I'm asking you to change that. So here's the thing that I want you to do. When you look at that negative thing or things that you wrote down, what things could you write down that are completely the opposite of that I believe are the truth or could become the truth? What is it? What is that thing, that statement that you could write down that would be in complete opposition to, contrary to that negative thing? And I want you to craft that in a statement, in a sentence. Whatever that negative thing was that you wrote down, acknowledge it. Now what I want you to do is I want you to write the truth. I want you to rewrite it. I want you to rewrite the story. I want you to rewrite the affirmation, because make no mistake about it, affirmations can be both positive and negative. And we've got to take a conscious role, a proactive role in making certain that our affirmations on a daily basis, privately, are positive and not negative. Take the time right now to rewrite one of those negative statements. Right now, write it down. Take the next 30 to 60 seconds and write it down. How could you rewrite it? And even if at this point you say, well, if I rewrote it to say that, it's not true. Here's the thing that I want you to just do for me. Do me a favor. Have faith that it is. If it's hard for you to write it down and you say, well, I don't know that I believe that, I get it. Because how many years have you been saying the opposite? How many years? And you think by rewriting it that all of a sudden you're going to feel differently. No, you're not. It's not that easy. Just as it's not easy to begin to think negatively, it's not easy to think positively. It's something that you have to do repeatedly over and over and over again and get into a rut. And ruts can be both negative and positive. So what is that positive statement that can extinguish that negativity? What is the polar opposite? Now that you have that, here's what I want you to do. Same exercise. I want you to go 10, 15, 20, 30 years, the end of your days, 85, 90, 95-year-old man or woman. What does your life look like? Are you happy? Are you rich? Are you in a kind, loving, caring relationship or relationships? You're surrounded by people who love you and you love? Are you healthy? Are you healthy mentally, physically, emotionally? What was your experience? Were the previous decades fulfilling? Did you live your dreams? Are you happy? Well, guys and gals, the single most important conversation we can have is with ourselves. I want you to walk away today with just simply a higher level of awareness, a conscious level of the things that you say to yourself. Look, I'm not perfect at this. I'm not. I have negative thoughts. But one of the things that I strive towards every single day and multiple times during the course of the day, at any given moment, is to examine, how do I feel? I want you to write that down, just simply asking the question, how do I feel? One of the most important questions that anybody can ask themselves is simply, how do I feel? It's just a temperature check and how I'm doing mentally, physically, and emotionally. And if the answer is not very well, then ask this question, why? It all comes down to this equation, and you've heard me talk about it a lot. You've heard George talk about it a lot, but it's so critical. I'm going to say this to you. What you think affects your emotions. In other words, the way you feel. mentally. So what you think affects the way that you feel, and the way you feel affects what you do on a daily basis. And then what you do, of course, affects your reality. So if you want to change your reality, you got to go back to the beginning part of the equation. Be conscious of what it is you're thinking about. And if there's room to change or to improve what you're thinking about, you've got to be conscious about what you're thinking and work to change that. You've got to rewrite the story, the narrative. You're the storyteller. You're the writer, the producer, the director, the actor. This is your story. This is your show. This is your movie. Only you can ultimately change it. You know, you're going to have others in your life, just like Thomas Edison's mother, who told him what was true as opposed to what wasn't, right? And it had a very significant impact. But guys and gals, we got to make certain that we're taking responsibility for the way we're thinking and the way we're behaving, because it is you, it is me. That's it. So I hope that you'll take the time to not only take whatever which you've written down today, but go through this exercise and to work on it on a daily basis. In fact, what I would suggest that you do, this is what I do. I believe in 3x5 cards. I'll take the 3x5 card and I'll write down those negative thoughts, whatever they were. And then on the reverse of it, I'll write down the positive statements, the things that are completely the opposite of those negative statements. And then I will do a temperature check. Just ask myself, you know, check up from the neck up. John, how do you feel? And if I don't feel positive, I ask this question: why? What's going on? And then I'll identify the reasons why I'm feeling negative or not hopeful. And then I just simply ask this question: well, what is the truth? What really is the truth? And when I shift my focus from the negative to the positive, it's interesting that over time, as I've gotten better and better at this, the amount of time that I'm in a negative state of mind versus a positive, it changes so quickly. It's a skill set. This is a skill set. Mindset is a skill set. And when you understand the formulas, the process, the systems that you can use to maintain it, to get back up on top, and you practice it over and over again, it becomes this new rut. Instead of being negative all the time, we can be positive all the time. See, they say that the average person has 60,000 thoughts and most of it's negative. That's the average person. You're not average. The fact that you are here this morning tells me you're not average. So don't be average. It's a conscious level decision to not be average, to be abnormal. I'm abnormal. I want you to be abnormal. Be abnormal and be great. Thomas Edison was abnormal. The Wright brothers, abnormal. Elon Musk, abnormal. Quirky, abnormal. See, it's abnormal people who do great things. Guys and gals, be abnormal and go out and do great things in this business and great things in your life. So I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have as well. I share it with you because it's been impactful for me on a personal level. So hopefully you'll allow it to do the same thing for you. So let's finish this up with